Grazie mille, sono molto felice di essere qui. Scusate, io voglio parlare un po' in inglese, perché è più facile per me sentire in inglese che nell'italiano. I know that you have been here for a long day, a lot of speakers, so I'm going to promise you that you'll not have time to have a nap. It's going to be short and a couple of minutes. I will remove my hat now as a Consul General, and probably I will speak more as an ex-lecturer, because I know that many of the people who are attending today, they come from the academic world. And I would like to really reflect, since this part of this intervention was supposed to be about the prospects of democracy in the Arab world. I would like to speak with you freely, without any restrictions, because we diplomats, usually we have a lot of restrictions. We are not supposed to speak much. So I will try to be more open with you in my short intervention. And when we speak about the prospects of democracy, there is a basic question which is always raised in the West. Sometimes it's raised in an explicit manner, sometimes it's raised in an implicit manner. And the question is, before we speak about democracy, are Arabs fit for democracy? This is a question that has been raised many times. What I will try to talk about very briefly, 4 things. Are they fit for democracy? And what does democracy mean? Because my understanding of democracy might be very different from your understanding of democracy. And what are the prospects, the third point I would raise, what are the prospects of democracy in the context of the Arab Spring? And last but not least, I will raise some questions regarding Europe's national interest in this context, because this is something that I think it would be interesting for some of the people who are attending today. So let's start with the first one. Are Arabs fit for democracy? As far as I know, and please feel free to correct me, I didn't hear of any scientific study that says that Arabs genetically, they are not fit for democracy. It has not been proven by science, until now at least, that there is something in the genes of Arabs which is anti-democratic. So this is something to reflect upon. Some people think that because of religion, because of culture, and I think it was mentioned today in the morning, some way, the religious and the cultural part in the presentation of the president of THINK, which I take the opportunity to thank him and all the other organizers for this event. That there might be something related to Islam, because Islam is the dominant religion in that part of the world, more or less. Or it has to do with the culture. There is something in this culture which is not democratic. By nature, it's not. The religion, by nature, is a violent religion, so it's not capable of being democratic. So why to talk about democracy in an environment which is not suitable for that? And here I can think of 2 examples when I think of religion and culture. The first one, if I go back a little bit in history, to the history of the Arab culture, the Islamic culture, to the history of Andalusia, Spain. If we go back a couple of centuries ago, under Islam, we had a lot of prosperity during that time. It was actually one of the lights of the modern world at that time. Many of the sciences of that time, they were produced under that culture. If we come to current days, I can think a little bit of Southeast Asia, some countries in Southeast Asia, which are Islamic, but they don't have this clash with the idea of democracy. So this might be something to reflect upon, that from a religious point of view, from a cultural point of view, I don't think there is any impediment for the Arabs to be democratic. So now let me move to my second point. What does democracy mean? I mean, from a Western perspective, democracy is about ballots, it's about presidential elections, it's about transfer of power in a peaceful way. But we have to ask ourselves one question. Is there one form of democracy that fits in every region of the world, irrespective of the cultural, as it was mentioned today in the morning, the cultural, the ethnic, the religious, the linguistic diversities. I mean, I can think of Nespresso having the same Nespresso in Milano and in Shanghai and in Beirut, because Nespresso is Nespresso. Wherever you have it, it has the same taste. But I cannot think of democracy the way I think of Nespresso. The effect of thinking of democracy as a one formula is devastating, because you have to always to keep in mind that we have different social structures in different countries. In some countries, numerical democracy, which means, and I'm sure all of you know that, 51%, if you have 51% of the ballots, then you have the majority. Numerical democracy might not be the most suitable form of democracy for certain countries. In some countries, we have to think of another form of democracy, which might be called sometimes the concessional democracy, which should take into consideration the sensitivities of a culture, the sensitivities of languages, of tribes, sects, etc. So having said that, I move to my third point in this intervention. I'm almost done. So what are the prospects of democracy in the context of the Arab Spring? What I can say, based on the first 2 points, I don't think Arabs are unfit for democracy. And I don't think that democracy is one unique formula. It has to be tailored in different Arab countries in a different way, depending on the structure of society and depending on the sensitivities of each society. So are there certain prospects for democracy? Yes, I think there are. But it has to be perceived not as something which is imposed, something which is imported from the West. It has to be rooted in the social fabric of the society. And this is something very important. I recall when I used to teach, a very famous scholar called Robert Putnam. I'm sure many of you heard of him, because he had an extensive study about Italy. He studied the Italian society for more than 20 years. And one of the most important conclusions that Putnam reached was that the social fabric of a society, the political culture, even in the same country, different social fabrics, different political culture would lead to different methods of administration. So if we take that assumption and we try to project it on the Arab world, we need to work on the social structure of the society. Keep in mind that in the Arab world, we don't have basically what we call the social infrastructure. When I say social infrastructure, I mean unions, I mean clubs, I mean associations, I mean venues for people to express themselves freely. We also have to keep in mind that if we look at the Human Arab Development Report, which was a major report, one of the striking evidence of that report is that women, which is 50% of the society, is in many societies not participating. So we have 50% of the society which is not there in some cases, and we don't have the social infrastructure. So if we don't have these two ingredients, if we don't have the foundations for building democracy, how can we think of democracy succeeding in that sense? Last but not least, I would like to touch upon the role that Europe can play and the interest of Europe in this context. It was mentioned today something very important. And the question that comes to my mind, is Europe immune from what's happening? I mean, there won't be a domino effect, there won't be a Lampedusa effect, as was mentioned today, or other effects. I don't think Europe, in a globalized world, in the world we are living today, democracy in the Arab world is in the national interest of Europe, and especially South European countries, because these countries are our neighboring countries. This is a problem for the Arab world But it's not only for the Arab world. The Lampedusa effect is one of the effects. There might be other effects which are much, much more dangerous than the Lampedusa effect. So this is something to reflect upon. And if we accept these premises, we have to think, how can European countries assist at least in two dimensions? In building the social infrastructure. This is something that Europe has a long history, and it has a lot of knowledge to share and to assist with. And the other thing is empowering women. Because if we compare that part of the world with Europe, we see that we have a lot of discrepancies in terms of empowering women. Having said that, I thank you, and I thank you again for your patience, and I thank again the organizers for this very important event. Thank you.